To First Morning Meteorologist Eric Burris. This is Coffee Talk. We get together 7 days a week to chat about what's going on in the world of weather. We'll be discussing our local stuff right now, our local stuff this afternoon. We're going to peek ahead to the tropics and basically just go over every little bit of information that you need. I will remind you, though, that on a day like today, we're also chatting about the tropics at 10 a.m. We've got our Tracking the Tropics broadcast. WJCL sister station, Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson will be joining us, and we'll be doing a deep dive there, so good times. But for now, let's just look outside and see what's doing. There's a shot from our Tower Cam network, downtown Orlando off in the distance, and it is looking absolutely beautiful, isn't it? Right? It is. Here's a live look at our first warning Doppler radar, though. There is a little bit of rainfall out over the Gulf Coast. Not bothering us much, but if you live out west of town, certainly you're seeing some darker skies that direction. Temperature-wise, 80 degrees in Orlando. It's 81 in Claremont, 78 in DeLand, 77 degrees in Palm Coast. So it's a nice, warm morning. Temperatures this afternoon are climbing, though. We're expecting 97 in Orlando, 96 in Leesburg, 95 degrees in the Villages. And as we break it down, there you go, 50% coverage of showers and storms. We're at least heading in that direction. I think that we'll get that 97, then we'll get the storms, then the temperatures will start to drop off just a little bit. But we're starting this trend with more opportunity to see rainfall. And at the end of the day, that's only going to serve us wonderfully, right? I mean, really and truly. So in terms of today's rainfall coverage map, there you go. Looking better and better and better across Central Florida. So let's do this. Let's time it all out using our Futurecast model just to get an idea, right? So here we are this morning, nice and quiet. That goes kind of without saying, right? By 10, 11 o'clock, though, the model is trying to spark up some of that activity out over the West Coast. And then after that, that West Coast sea breeze really sparking up our afternoon thunderstorms. Now, I will say that this particular flavor of Futurecast has backed off on the coverage. I don't think that that's doing a great job, if I'm 100% honest. Let's dial up the rapid refresh. I'm just curious what it's saying. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely showing a bit more of a collision there. STP. Okay, all right, let's look at this one. So this Futurecast is kind of showing a bit of a later collision. So it'll be interesting to see in terms of timing, is it a later collision or not? But I do think that in terms of the forecast today, we're going to once again have a decent coverage of storms. And I do think that it's going to be earlier, but we may see it linger later. But I do think that we'll see that actual sea breeze collision fire up around 3, 4, 5 o'clock and then linger through about 7, 8 o'clock or so. All right, so that's kind of where we're at. The end of the day, we need rainfall, though. Look at these numbers across Central Florida. Month to date, we are running in a pretty decent deficit, but that's just month to date. If you want to talk about year to date, we had really made up for all of our rainfall deficit, but year to date, we are running well behind now. 6.5 inches behind where we should be. In Orlando, 4 inches plus behind where we should be. Double negative. Anyway, you get the idea. 5.5 inches of rain behind in Leesburg. Yeah, it's a problem. Spencer says the rain is allergic to West Orange County. It's kind of been allergic to the entirety of Central Florida. We're not into like a serious drought condition. And as a matter of fact, if we look at the Keach-Byram Drought Index, we're still doing pretty okay. But like Osceola County, for example, starting to get into that brighter shade. It's not bad, but, you know, we were in that deep blue, and we've kind of started working up the scale. So the soil, the Keach-Byram Drought Index kind of looks at soil and moisture at depth. We're still okay, but we're not as okay as maybe we've been, right? So it's one of those things just to kind of keep in mind. right? And just to go over it, like fire danger index continues to be nice and low across just about all of Central Florida. So that's where we're at. All right, now rain chances are going up, and in turn, our air temperatures are coming down. Take a look at the high temperatures the next couple of days. That's a pretty dramatic shift, you ask me. 97 on Tuesday, 95 on Wednesday, 91 degrees on Thursday and Friday. You gotta love that. I mean, you don't gotta, but I think you do. That's just me, though. So, yeah. In terms of advisories today, we are under heat advisories across Central Florida. That, it says tomorrow. That's because I loaded the wrong version. Hold on. Here's the correct version. All right, so from about 11 a.m. to 7 p.m., we will be under those heat advisories. That goes kind of without saying. We know the drill. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's going to again be a nice and hot day in Central Florida, to the point where I do think we're going to be getting to some record temperatures, particularly watching Orlando, Sanford, Daytona Beach. Those are the three areas we are really going to be watching. All right? All right. So, questions, comments, concerns. Savannah, I have a question. Hi, Savannah. What's your question? You're the next contestant on The Price is Right. Tell me, what's your question? It's a beautiful day. At least we've got that going for us, right? Right? Savannah, everyone is saying there's going to be a Category 6 hurricane in September. The good news is that that's not going to be the case. Super happy about that. But we are definitely tracking the tropics. Shameless plug, 10 a.m. today, WJCL Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson and I will be tracking the tropics, certainly. But we can take a look now and just kind of get an idea of what's doing, okay? So first off, let's just take a look and see what's doing, because this is definitely the big topic of conversation here. There are two areas that the Hurricane Center is watching. Both have a relatively low-end chance of developing. Now, let's zoom in on the satellite. You know what? Let me do it a different way. Stand by 1 second. Tropic. All right. Excuse me. All right. So here's a look at the satellite imagery. Let's just reset and kind of get an idea. So there's two areas that we're watching. Okay, let's zoom in here. The first area is this wave right in here. And the Hurricane Center is watching it, and the problem is it's going face first into Saharan dust. So the Hurricane Center has lowered wave number one's development chance, okay? Now, that said, this wave about to come off the coast of Africa, the second wave, is going to be moving into moistened atmosphere, number one. Number two, it's also moving into the most environmentally favorable condition we've seen in a while, and it's the most rigorous tropical wave that we have seen this season. So that first wave, the Hurricane Center has dropped development chances over the next 7 days to 10%. The second wave, a bit of a different story, raising that to 30%. Now, what I am curious about is this first wave, while its development chance lowers, as that remnant moisture moves into the Caribbean, this to me is the most interesting scenario, because this second wave is more than likely going to want to kind of like go up, around, and recurve. But this first wave, as it works weak into the Caribbean and then finds some stable enough atmosphere that it can start to develop in here, that to me will be the most interesting kind of thing to play out. And you'll notice that that's what the models are really trying to drive a point home about, okay? The models are trying to say more of a homegrown type thing next week to watch, instead of a way out, developing, coming and getting, okay? So let's do this. Let's take a couple of minutes. Let's look at the computer forecast models and let's see what they're saying, all right? And if you're new to Coffee Talk, we do deep dives here on the Coffee Talk, all right? This is a look at the raw GFS. Let me switch it to the full Atlantic Basin. And it's definitely kind of developing the second wave, weakening the first wave, kind of doing a little bit. You see that? It's like a Fujiwara effect there. Kind of looping it around and then becoming one system doing its thing. That's next Thursday, the 24th of August. But meanwhile, watch Central America. A little CAG low developing into a system and then lifting up, in this case, in the operational model's case, kind of lifting it up toward the Florida panhandle. And that would be a hurricane. The favorability of this is a bit lower, given the, see how, and this is the key point. It's all about timing here. Because if we get something trying to develop, watch how it moves up and then watch right here. Watch it get kicked over to the east. Boom! There's a big cold front and the jet stream. What I think is going to happen is this is going to develop and then kind of go east of Florida up toward the Carolinas. At least that's what the long-range pattern should dictate. So that's the GFS operational. Let's look at the GFS ensemble plots. Notice they're far more desired east, right? Like if we look at all the low locations, they're kind of all over the place. But when you look at the ones that are actually trying to do stuff, it's kind of a Caribbean, Florida East type thing. So to me, I'm the reality is this ties into the timeline of the Carolina part of our weather pattern. So to me, that's what I'm watching for. But the ensembles continue to come alive, and important to note that the ensembles vary from the operational GFS. That's why you can't just look at an operational model and be like, look what the GFS is doing. That's great, but that's not the full story, okay? So that's the GFS. And again, when I showed the ensembles, just so that everybody's in the same, understands what this is, okay? This is an ensemble. Basically, what it does is it takes all the data and it changes it. And instead of just looking at one version of the GFS, you're looking at a bunch. And you can see like ensemble, you see where it says P06, like it's developing a tropical system in the Caribbean there, that green dot, whereas, P14 kind of toward the bottom, also developing it. So instead of just showing it to you this way, I try to make it a little cleaner, and we just kind of look at all of them on top of each other here. Yeah, and the lowered pressures are kind of out east. So that's the GFS ensemble. Any questions about that before we switch over to the European? Because I know if you're here, odds are if you're here, you have at least a little bit of a knowledge of kind of the nerd tropical stuff that we do, and I want to embrace that for sure. All right. Yeah, I definitely want to kind of help as best I can. Anne-Marie, first tropical storm or hurricane? For the season, Anne-Marie, we have had both a tropical storm and a hurricane. So, I don't know. Wendy says, please be right, Eric. Well, listen, all I can do is look at the patterns using the tools in the tool chest. But I will still look at and read the models as best I can for you. Mickey over on YouTube says, tracking the tropics is going to be interesting today. I think so. I think it's going to be good. I really do. Carol's asking, what were the dates for the Carolinas for that part of the weather pattern? Here is the dates that we had published on March the 1st for the Carolinas part of the weather pattern, showing that the first two were non-tropical, but there was a storm system there each time. August 21st through the 29th. August 21st through the 29th. So if we look at the computer model, I'd already turned it around. Give me a minute here. Um, 21st through the 29th, right? And that's the 24th, that's the 26th, that's the 28th. So it fits that timeline. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. All right. Any questions, comments, concerns? Let's see here. Embrace the weather nerd, Diane says. I'll take that. I'll take it. Yeah. I meant maybe to land in Florida. Gotcha, Anne-Marie. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Let me switch over to the European here. Basin. Okay. All right. So here's the European computer forecast model showing both of those areas of low pressure trying to develop. So we've got that going for us. Even if not too strong, which is fine. Then again, the European has a bit of a Fujiwara effect right there. You see that? The second wave is stronger and kind of overruns the first wave. And then meanwhile, there's an area of low pressure that kind of forms east of the Antilles. You see it right there near the Cay and Talk? Moving into the Caribbean right there. And then kind of working up around Cuba and the Florida Straits, right? It's weak, but it's there. And then the European kind of has it going over toward like Texas, Louisiana, and then this other thing kind of going up toward Bermuda. So let's switch over to the European ensembles. Do that. So interestingly enough, to me at least, the European is wanting to, instead of it being a Caribbean type thing, watch how it's got a wave kind of central Atlantic forming and recurving and staying out to sea. And then it's got most of that activity staying out to sea. But it's trying to figure out vorticity in a recurvature scenario, right? How close or how far from us, that's to be seen. But we see some ensemble members spitting some stuff up in the Gulf and east of us. Right? So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And again, this is not looking at like the end of days. You're just looking at 100 different models on top of each other. The ensembles. It's a really great tool. All right, let's switch over. Let's look at the Canadian ensembles. Why not? All right. So the Canadian ensembles are kind of split, with maybe the Canadian leaning a little more toward the Gulf of Mexico, and then some ensembles staying east of us. So, the Canadian, I think, is the most indifferent of all the models, at least at the moment. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. At the end of the day, that's going to be interesting just to see how this all plays out. Right? Oh, I survived the clothing change. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's just annoying. Catherine, I did not sleep. Nope. I'm tired today. I'm really tired today. I think I'm doing the noon, and then I may leave work a little early today to go see my mother. Yep. Becky, good morning. What does tomorrow look like? It looks a bit stormier. Yeah. Jan says you should teach when you retire from TV weather. You're a great communicator. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll take that. I know when it's time to retire. I told Tony that I want to retire at 65. Tony told me he wants to retire at 65. So the good news is he gets to retire before me. The bad news is he gets to retire before me. Yeah. But yeah, when I turn 65, I mean, who knows what age I retire. I'm working like heck so that I can retire young. If I can pull off 60 or 62, I would do it. Who knows? A guy can dream, right? Elizabeth, so each of those L's is like a spaghetti model line representation. Exactly. And there's ways to visualize it differently. But for me, kind of in the more diagnostic sense, this is the way that I like to look at it. Yeah. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Jessica, once the rain leaves, will we get hit with more dangerous heat? That's a good question. So when we look at the 7-day forecast locally, what you'll notice is that, at least for now, we have broken this pattern, okay? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, rain chances will be going up, and that is going to help us dramatically. So that's a good thing. But in terms of actually like getting rid of the heat, it's still summer. So that's kind of where we're at. It's still summer. It's still going to be hot, but as long as we can keep some storms around, then we'll keep some storms around. Anna says, no, retire early. Do it at full retirement age. I know. Janet, what do you mean you wish you could pull it? I just mean I wish that I could retire at 60 or 62. Is that going to happen? Probably not, but, if I could, I would. That's all. That's all I mean. Don't we have a repeat part of the pattern for Florida the first week of September? So we have 2 parts of the pattern coming up for Florida to watch, okay? The first one is going to be the kind of the panhandle / Gulf Coast part of the pattern, okay? The Florida West Coast storm. Each time that we watch this recycle, there was a decent storm system. In May and in July, it never became tropical. What was interesting is each time that it developed, it crossed and then moved up toward the Carolinas. And so there's that. August 30th through September 5th. Now, that said, what I would be curious about is if we get okay, follow me here. If we get a recurvature that gets close to the Carolinas as the Carolina part of the pattern, and then this Gulf stuff ends up being the Gulf part of the pattern that goes up to the Carolinas. That's possible if the models kind of back it up. So it's interesting. That would be interesting to see play out. So that's the next Florida part of the pattern, okay? We've watched in May and in July a storm system develop. Was never tropical storm or anything like that. So there's that. But to me, August 30th through September 5th, absolutely watching the Gulf Coast. That's number 1. Then number 2, the Florida East Coast part of the pattern. This is the one to me that I'm most interested in, and that's going to be September 8th through the 14th. Janet says, I retired at 50 and now going back at 57. Not always fun. Too much time on your hands. That's an interesting point. I mean, I think that no matter what, I would keep myself busy, even if it was a matter of like volunteering or something. That's all I mean. So yeah, for Florida, it's going to be right at the end of August through about September 14th. That's the timeline. Yeah. Spencer's asking, was Ian a part of the pattern last year? It was, but it's not a part of this year's pattern. Yeah, it's cycled out, it's done. Now we're looking at another part of the pattern. So that's where we're at. All right. By the way, you can read and learn all about my long-range forecast if you're curious. I'm never going to be shy about it. I put so much work into this stuff. wesh.com/hurricane forecast. That's where you can check it out. Unchanged since March the 1st when we put that out. Lots of great information there. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Just a couple of things to watch out in the Atlantic for now. A reminder, at 10 a.m. today, Jeremy Nelson and I are going to be tracking the tropics. Yeah, you'll want to stick around for that. But at least there's no big threats. It'll just be interesting. It'll just be interesting to see what plays out here, for me at least. Susie says we plan Hub's retirement for 62, but life happened. He just turned 65 and no retirement in sight. I mean, I know that I'm the kind of person that has to work, do something. So if it's a part-time deal, if it's a volunteer deal, I know that I will do something. Yeah. If it's just coffee talk and I could be meteorologist emeritus, that would be a dream come true as well. You know, I'll take that. Why have the tropics been so quiet with the warmer waters? Seems like the last couple of weeks we haven't had any storms. Well, Russ, we haven't. Yeah, you're right. We haven't. Among other things, Saharan dust. There's been a lot of Saharan dust keeping us dry. And because of that, haven't been able to develop stuff. But that Saharan dust is starting to quiet down, and thus things are going to start to wake up. Elizabeth's asking about a 3:30 coffee talk. I'll be here for 3:30 today for sure. Mickey, would be interesting to see what the BSR says. Of course. Why didn't I do that before? All right, stand by. BSR. Let me get it takes a couple of button clicks to get this set up here. All right, the BSR. If you're unfamiliar with this is something that we use a lot in the winter time and in the fall. It's another long-range technique that I have. All right. So let's just get an idea of what I'm looking at here. Let's see here. It does involve some simple math calculations, so I just need to... All right, so... So that's like this Friday, Saturday. Doesn't look that far off, so that's good. High pressure. That looks good. Little trough, kind of south of us. That's like the 24th-ish. Little trough moves by us. Then there's a little area of low pressure, a couple of storms here. Like, look at that. That's quite a storm system there. That's the 28th. Look at that little storm system. You see that? It's north of Florida, and then it goes right over and deepens over the Carolinas. And that... Yeah, that's the 28th. So, I mean, that tells me that at the very least now, is it going to be that far north and then it bombs out and moves toward the Carolinas? Or is it more of like it develops over Florida kind of thing? But that tells me around the 28th of the month, we're probably going to have a storm system up around the Carolinas. That's a nice, big, clear signal. So the BSR, the Bering Sea Rule, is giving us that little indicator. This is like a teleconnection of sorts. And then there, a little storm system. You see that? Look at that, y'all. Okay. That's the system kind of forming in the Gulf. That's the 31st of August. Getting into the 1st of September. So we're clearly seeing a storm system around the Carolinas in that Carolina window. And we're clearly seeing a storm system in the Gulf working toward the Big Bend in the window of time and the location that we're calling for something in the Gulf Coast. That's interesting. Mickey, first off, always love when you reach out. Second off, I think that I'm going to be showing Jeremy Nelson a bunch of this before our coffee talk. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. That's lining up perfectly. And I don't like that. Yep. Laura says my dad hated retirement. I just feel like I would stay busy. That's all. Mickey says I'm always amazed when your LRC and BSR line up. I think if I'm honest, I'm always amazed because I'm like, how the blankety blank is that possible? Holy cannoli. Okay, well now I just can't wait to talk with Jeremy Nelson. Another indicator that the Carolinas and the West Coast should be watching, right? Now, people love making fun of us weather people. Oh, you're doing this for ratings. Remember, I am not at work right now. I'm not even on the clock yet. We're not doing this. I'm not doing this for ratings. I'm doing this because I like nerding out with a group of people. And my nerd advice is, y'all, let's just watch the tropics closely because things are starting to wake up. And the BSR is directly lining up, to my surprise, which it always is, with the long-range forecast we put out in March. Okay. All right. Be the sunshine in someone else's day. I will see you guys and gals at 10 a.m. You don't want to miss today's Tracking the Tropics. Seriously. All right? All right. Karen, do not be scared. No. Bad. bad, Karen. Don't be scared. Rosebud says, Mickey asks the best questions. I just love all y'all's questions. Last one. I retired at 54, Brian says, being able to do so because of my high-risk job category, but I walked right into another job and I've worked since 9 years now. However, after my retirement, I made a rule. When the job I'm doing isn't fun anymore, I will move on to something else. Having fun, making money is a good thing. Brian, I think that's my goal. I love doing weather, but I don't love the hours. So at 65, if they're like, we want you to do weather still, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to do it on my terms then. And if the boss is cool with that, maybe I'll do weather until I'm 90. Doing like the noon show only. I don't know. What, you know what I mean? Like coffee talk and the noon show, whatever. We'll figure it out. I've got some years to go. I'm 39, so we've got some time. All right. Be the sunshine in someone else's day. Thank y'all. I will see you at 10 a.m. for Tracking the Tropics. Cannot wait to hear what Jeremy has to say about the BSR. It'll be interesting. All right. We'll look at the models.